welcome, welcome. We had a pretty exciting session last month on Copilot, and kind of interactive session there. Today we're going to be going back to quite a few different demos, and then we're going to end with an interactive session, getting feedback on some new software distribution capabilities we're planning. But today we're just going to start up. Okay. So yeah, we're going to start off with just some quick announcements, updates. Then I'm going to hand it over to Raj, who's going to share this really neat new SQL Server migration assessment, which is currently in public preview. We'll have Rahul from the Azure Monitor team, who's going to talk about VM monitoring through VM Insights. Then we're going to have Amit, who's going to show from the machine configuration team an ESU patch assessment policy capability. And we're going to be ending off with some interactive feedback on software distribution and VM apps for Arc Server. Cool. With that, I wanted to share quick agent release notes. We had agent 1.38 for February released. This included support for Alma Linux 9, continue to work on support for additional Linux distros. It also includes listening on IPv6 local address for the HMDS service. We have some improvements in the logging for extension manager and policy, and some improved reliability when it comes to getting some of the OS metadata. Another piece is we are reducing some of the CPU usage with our extension manager for performance impact. The final thing we wanted to call out here is run command is still in public preview. You're able to evaluate that capability, and so we have CLI and PowerShell support as well now. So feel free to check out the docs, test it out. And we are meeting with folks that are providing us feedback. So if you're interested, you can check out this ak.ms link for run command's public preview. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Raj to do screen share and speak through our SQL Server migrate assessment. Awesome. Raj, you're on the call?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you, Arnav.
Awesome.
Let me start sharing my desktop first. Okay. So for next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to spend some the exciting new feature that we kind of added in Arc-enabled SQL Server that really helps customers to streamline their migration journey from their on-premises SQL servers to Azure SQL. So before I go there, I want to briefly talk about the different migration phases that customers really goes through when it comes to the cloud migrations. Starting from discovery exercise, essentially what it really means is that collecting all the inventory of all your SQL servers, the application servers, and find out their dependencies and just really plan for migrations. And in the next page, we're in the planning where they want to really understand like how ready these SQL servers migrate into Azure SQL, what would be the right deployment option in Azure SQL, and then the size which really fits their performance and price. Really kind of able to go and serve the workload performance and at the same time optimize their costs. So all this planning happens in the planning cycle, and then the third stage is that the execute stage where how do we really migrate these databases and applications that really minimize the business impact to their line of business applications, basically, right? So these are the three major phases in the migration journey. And once you really migrate to cloud, then you are going to start optimizing your operations. And you start optimizing your operations and as well as start optimizing your cost savings in terms of leveraging the cloud services to optimize your operations and all that, right? So basically in this, as you note here, basically in this entire migration journey, you're going to start leveraging or optimizing your costs only in the final stage of your migration. That means only once you migrate your SQL servers and applications, that is the only time that you're going to get those optimizations. But with Arc, what will happen is with Arc enablement, what will happen is that from the day one of your migration journey, we are going to start optimizing your operations by leveraging the cloud services. By bringing the cloud services to your on-premises environment, we are helping you to optimize their environment to begin with. So from the day one of your migration journey, you're going to get those optimizations. And at the same time, it also going to help you to further streamline your migration journey as well once you connect to your SQL servers to Arc-enabled SQL servers. So as first step of streamlining those migration journey to Azure, the very first feature that we kind of enabled is called SQL Server migration assessments to Azure SQL. So what does this assessment will do is that this assessment will auto-enabled by default. You don't have to do additional configuration. All you need to do is you just connect your SQL servers to Arc, and then this assessment will automatically enabled for you. And what does this assessment do for you? I have a demo that I'm going to show, but briefly, it really tells you that how ready your SQL servers migrating to Azure, and then what would be the size and the SKU size for your SQL Server workload when they migrate to Azure. That can give you the performance that is really required for your environment to migrate, and as well as it's going to optimize for your cost. So it's going to give that kind of information for you. And these assessments are auto-enabled for you so that you don't need to really do additional configuration, and they run continuously once in a week, so that they are kind of resilient to your changes that you're making to source as part of optimizing your migration journey. So it's kind of runs continuously. And there are no additional costs for running this assessment on your environment. And it also supports starting from SQL Server 2012 and above. So this is the new feature that we released last month that I really want to showcase to you. So let me quickly go into the demo here. So here you have this Arc-enabled SQL Server that you kind of connect to your SQL Server to Azure. And then when it comes to the new feature that you see here in the migration tab here, assessment, and then the assessment will show the actual readiness of your SQL Server migrating to Azure SQL. At first, it is going to tell you how ready your SQL Server migrating to various deployment options in the Azure: SQL MI, SQL VM, and Azure SQL Database. Right? In each of these migration target options, it will tell you if it is not ready. For example, if the SQL Server is not ready for some reason, then it will tell you why it is not ready. In this case, the example is Azure SQL DB. Why the SQL Server is not ready to migrate to Azure SQL DB? Which of those databases that they have the migration blockers. For example, in this case, the inventory database has a service broker feature enabled, which is kind of using a service broker, which is not supported in the Azure SQL DB, but it is supported on the SQL MI and SQL VM. That's the reason you see that SQL Server is ready to migrate to SQL MI and SQL VM, right? So that way, it tells you what migration blockers that you have, and also it gives you the mitigation steps in case if you really want to address, right? So that kind of information that it will give you, and it also provides you the specific size of the SQL Server that you want to provision when you migrate to SQL Azure SQL. So in this case, it is going to be SQL MI. So the way that we really compute the size is by looking at your performance of your SQL Server workload for last 30 days. Based on those last 30 days of performance, we look at your CPU usage, we look at your memory, we look at your IOPS requirement, disk IOPS requirement, and then we really look at the 95th percentile of times where you have this requirement in place. And based on that, we really come up with a SKU recommendation to you so that it is going to render the performance that you really need for your workload, but at the same time, it is kind of an optimizer for cost as well, so that you don't end up with a SKU that is pretty large that you don't really need and end up with paying additional cost, or creating a SKU which is pretty small which may not be able to render the performance that you required. So this is an optimal recommendation that we make to you, right? So this is the assessment that we released for February, but we have plans to further optimize this whole experience to begin with by introducing the migration experience as well in the upcoming feature. So there is a lot of investment that we are making in the migrations area for Arc-enabled SQL Server, so that it is going to streamline your migration experience end to end from your on-premises environment or any SQL servers which are running on outside of Azure in other clouds, that you can really bring it to Azure. Right. So so stay tuned with us for the rest of the other capabilities that we are going to be enabling the migration. But for now, go ahead and enable your SQL servers and start enjoying this assessment report that really help your cloud migrations. That's pretty much each. No, if there are any questions, I'm going to pause for some questions actually.
Awesome. I think there's some questions in the chat.
Okay.
I see there's a question about, is there a way to see the assessment for all your SQL servers, or is it a per server assessment today?
Yeah. So this assessment is a good question. This assessment is enabled for individual SQL server, but we are working on a feature where you should be able to see the assessment report holistically for the entire environment in a dashboard type of an experience, which is coming pretty soon, actually. Any other questions, Arnav?
So I see there's some questions about more technicality with the specific extension versions and supported OS. So maybe you could take those offline.
Yeah,
one more quick
very good
question.
question.
How much does this SQL Server assessment cost?
This assessment does not cost anything for you. It's free of cost.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the extension is we need to have to upgrade to the latest extension to get to this assessment report to begin with. I can provide that in the chat, but otherwise I also created a video recorded on this, which I go really much more deeper, and also created a blog which I'm going to provide as a reference links to you, so that you can really learn more about the assessment feature.
Awesome. Oh, and there was a question about security, how this is add from a security perspective as well as that part of the assessment, I think.
Good question. So security wise, we use least privileged account to run the SQL Server extension. And that is under that context, least privileged account context, that we access the SQL Server metadata to really assess your SQL servers. And I have a documentation which lists out all the permissions that are required for that least privileged account. And we make sure that we assign those permissions only when there is a need for it. Right. So the least privileged account, the assessment fully supports on the least privileged account configuration.
Awesome. Great. I think that's a wrap on questions. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing, Raj. This is super neat. It's secure, it's free, it's incredibly insightful. I hope people aren't going to drop the community call to test it out right now.
Please, awesome. Yeah, please do. And if you run into any issues, just let us know.
Awesome. Cool. And Raj, maybe you can provide your contact as well if folks have questions.
Yeah, so usually like we're pretty active on support cases. For example, there is an option there, support and troubleshooting. You can use that option. Either you can put a question or you can really send a support request to us, so that we can really immediately act on that. That's the best way to reach to us.
Awesome. Great. Next, we're going to invite up Rahul from the Azure Monitor team. So Rahul, if you're here,
hello.
Please.
Can you share the slide deck again?
Yep, absolutely. Here, I'm going to go ahead and screen share. And we are right here, right?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll take control. Okay, super. Thanks, Arnav, for inviting me. So I'm Rahul Bagaria. I'm from the Azure Monitor product team. So I don't have anything new for you today in terms of any announcement or extent changes here. What Arnav wanted me to talk about was, in context of Azure Arc, just share what's the broader landscape around monitoring, what are the current set of capabilities that we provide from the monitoring side, as well as best practices or recommendations we usually give in these Arc related scenarios. So on that front, I have just 2 slides to kind of give you that broad landscape. And if there are any questions or suggestions, I would love to discuss on that. So for those of you for whom Azure Monitor is relatively new, so this is our observability solution from Microsoft for resources such as virtual machines, applications, containers, running really anywhere. So if these resources are on Azure, it's a native out-of-the-box kind of monitoring experience. But if these resources are on-premises or in a multi-cloud environment, through Azure Arc, once you Arc enable the server or Kubernetes cluster, you get a near native monitoring experience, just like you would for an Azure resource. So in terms of VMs specifically, Arnav, you didn't approve my request. You need to just move one slide ahead. Okay, let me no, give me control again.
So I'm just doing this. 1 second.
You need to approve.
I'm trying to give you control. Okay, but I think this is the full slide, so maybe you just want to go ahead with this, and then for the demo, you can screen share.
Okay. Great. So in terms of Azure Monitor, specifically for an Arc-enabled server or like virtual machine, there are 3 tiers of monitoring that we recommend to our customers. And think about this as a maturity model, depending on your customer requirements, as well as the criticality or importance of the server being monitored. In various cases, these could be scale servers or kind of cattle VMs that we say, where you don't need like a full range of monitoring, just the very basics, so you can track their utilization, performance, etc. But there might be more mission critical servers or pet VMs in that terminology, where you need those event logs, syslogs, etc. So you are able to diagnose and investigate issues in much more depth, with additional cost, of course. So I'll go through these 3 layers if that also makes sense to you. The first layer is very basic baseline monitoring. We have a simple tool in Azure Monitor called VM Insights. So when you enable VM Insights for an Arc-enabled server, it basically collects some 7 to 8 basic perf counters for the VM. And there are out-of-the-box curated visualizations or dashboards or workbooks available where you can basically track your like performance, disk usage, network, IO, memory, all these basic telemetry. And if there are any spikes or issues going on, you can correlate it with additional data sources. So today, these metrics are stored as logs in a log analytics workspace. And we are working on a solution where we would provide an option to store them directly as metrics in the future, which will be like 99% cheaper. So that option is coming fairly soon. That's basic monitoring. The more standard set that we recommend, more on the recommended side, is something on top of VM Insights. We recommend you to use data collection rules in Azure Monitor to enable additional critical data collection. Now, this data collection depends on the OS. If it's a Windows server, there are event logs, like especially those critical error warning logs from the application security or system layer. Or if it's a Linux OS, they have something called syslog. So we recommend that you are at least collecting those warning logs from those environments and putting them in your log analytics workspace. This is helpful because it then lets you or lets the customer diagnose and troubleshoot any kind of issues that are happening on their server. And we recently ran a survey where this was, at least for mission critical servers, this was the highest priority data that everybody wanted to collect. The only caveat here is there is a lot of data collection, and data collection has cost. So if this is not a critical server, you might want to make this as an optional thing. Like, just to give you some data points, for on an average VM, you would see quarter GB to half GB of data collection a month. But for a top tier VM or a high load VM, it can even go to like 2 to 4 GB, 5 GB at 85, 90 percentiles. And that cost adds up when you're running at scale. So that's the caveat here. But yeah, once the data is available, you go to log analytics, run KQL queries, set up log alerts, etc., and even send this data to Sentinel for your security monitoring. So really very critical layer here. Last year, that's more on the custom side. You want to enable additional data collection based on your specific scenarios. So there are additional DCRs or data collection rules available. There are additional extensions available based on what you want to do. So let's say in case of log collection, you want to do additional perf counters, IIS logs, custom logs, you want to set up dependency data, connection data, etc. All of those you can enable using our agent. And if you want to extend it further, if you're coming from the SCOM background on premises and you are migrating to Azure or in that hybrid process, you can continue to use SCOM on premises or migrate to SCOM managed instance to kind of take advantage of that cloud layer. We have also recently started launching some starter packs or monitoring packs, which are on GitHub. These are community supported. Our CXP fast track team has been building these. So for specific workloads on your Arc-enabled servers, these starter packs could be good kind of starting points to help you with recommended data collection, like for resources like IIS or Nginx or DNS, print server, whatever you are running on these servers. So that's the highlight reel. Take screen share for a moment just to show you a quick thing. So the starter packs, this is what I was talking about. If you want to kind of just search for it online, just search for Azure Monitor starter packs. The first link you'll get is for the GitHub community. Here, there are these starter packs already available that I talked about. So IIS, Nginx, DNS, etc. But this is an open platform. There is authoring guidance. So if any of you want to contribute or kind of look at the current setup and figure out additional items you want to, additional packs you want to put here, this is a good resource to start. But once you have everything set up, you go to an Arc VM. On the overview, you can easily figure out whether VM Insights or monitoring was enabled. If yes, you can directly go there and get your standard VM Insights experience. But if it was not, you could just directly even go to logs and write those queries. So essentially, once you have Arc enabled a server, it's almost a very similar experience as you would monitor an Azure VM, with maybe the only exception being you are not collecting any platform level or host level telemetry, which may not even make sense for an on-prem server. So that's my spiel. Yes, question, SP.
Thank you so much for the introduction. In my team, we have been trying to set up Arc-enabled servers, mainly to ship the logs. Excuse me. So this use case was really relevant, what you just showed. And during the POC, we had some Arc servers created with a private link scope. But later we changed our decision and now we want to use public endpoints. So when I was trying to set up one more Arc resource with a public endpoint, I was getting errors that some of the endpoints are private and I need a private link scope. So does this mean either we have private link scope for all Arc servers or we have public endpoint? We cannot have both. Is that right?
Arnav, that might be a question to you.
Yes, I believe that you have to configure consistently with private link scope. We do have private link plus proxy for specific scenarios, but you typically have to decide between private link or public endpoint, and that's a status that gets inherited as well with the extensions and services you use. But at the same time, it is something you can configure or change down the road as well. Sorry, John.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm taking a look at these Azure Monitor starter packs. That's exciting. And I'm noticing that they're using Grafana. Is there a reason that we're using Grafana and not Azure Workbooks?
It's just as an example. So it's just what these authors for those packs chose, but the platform or the kind of setup that we have for the template, it's fairly open. As a pack author, you can decide to put a workbook template instead of a Grafana template. So it's just as proof of concepts or just initial trial runs. We started with Grafana just to see how that would work, but workbooks are equally applicable.
Is it planned that for the starter packs that are out there now that Azure Workbook based visualizations are going to be added to them, or do we have to tool up and deploy Grafana in order to use them, or do we need to?
We will be adding workbooks option as well.
Okay,
at least for the ones that our CXP team has authored.
Okay, thank you. And one other question that arises, I'm noticing that, for example, for the DNS pack, it has 50 alert rules. They seem to run many of them every 15 minutes. That is because that's not a zero cost to deploy these. I'm thinking that as a consumer of these, it would be helpful to basically put a price, put an estimated price tag to run all 50 of these in your environment. It's going to be $35 a month or $27 a month or whatever, based on the frequency and the quantity. I think that would be important from a usability standpoint. Is including that in scope?
That's great feedback. Thanks, John. I think the way we can incorporate that is one, within the documentation itself, like the page that I was showing, so where it describes the monitoring pack, we can give you an estimate that, okay, on an average, this might be additional cost once you decide to enable. But even in the UX that they have built for management and deployment, even in that UX, once you select such a pack, if estimated cost can be part of the metadata, that would be a useful item to kind of help you make that decision with more knowledge. So that's great feedback. Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again, Rahul, for coming in and sharing more about VM Insights and Monitor. And we're loving to see these management packs, like kind of starter pack solutions as well, Monitor. So it's really neat to see. Awesome. With that, I guess we can move to the next topic if there's no additional questions in the chat. And we're going to invite over Amit, who's going to showcase a neat new way to assess your extended security update patches. So Patch Tuesday, again, is coming up in 5 days for March. And so we want to make sure all of you are tracking your latest ESU patches. Awesome. Amit, you want to go ahead and screen share?
Yeah, thanks, Anu. Can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so, after we released ESU, feature last year, we have been getting a lot of, customer feedback through CRIs, from PM, and we have been talking to the customers also. So some of the challenges that our ESU customers are facing are like, this UI and this UI, it likes, if I have thousands of servers, right? How can I assign ESU licenses at a scale? Some customer end up, creating licenses, by mistake, right? And ESU licenses are expensive. How they can, prevent that happening? And some of the feedback are around like, okay, I have enabled ESU from this UI, and how do I know that my environment is good and there are no errors in that environment? And also, how do I know if all of my machines are up to date, right? They have received all the security patches. So we try to, address some of those problems through policy. So we have created couple of policies around this scenario. Some of the issues are like human errors, and it's hard to implement something around that. For example, they wanted to create a license for a standard server, but they created license for data center, right? So those kind of problem, it's hard to solve, but we try to address couple of issues that most of our customer are facing through policies. So for that, we have created couple of policies, and today I'm going to talk about patch assessment policy. So the experience for this policy is pretty simple. It is same like any other Azure policy. You can just find the policy by just typing extended security updates, and then you will see this policy, right? And you just click on it and you assign it to your subscription or management group. Once you assign this policy to your subscription, it's going to scan all of your machines under that particular subscription, and it's mainly going to check two things. One is whether your machines has any pending update, and the second thing, it is going to check the environment. Is there any problem with your ESU setup? uh, Maybe for some reason you assigned the ESU license, but that license is not delivered to your machine. In that case, you will not be able to receive ESU update. Or maybe there is some problem in the platform. Let's say your license is expired and platform has not renewed that license. In that case, you will not receive ESU update, right? Or you have not opted for automatic upgrade, then you might have some updates pending on your machine. So to address all those issues, what you can do, you can just assign this policy, and it will scan your machines and will show you the compliance report. And this is the view for compliance report right here. I have 5 machines, and out of 5 machines, 4 are non-compliant, 1 is compliant. That means this machine is up to date with all the patches, but these 4 machines has some problem. Now to see the details, like why these machines are reported as non-compliant here, what you can do, either you can click here, and then this will show this link for the detailed report. So you can click here and see the detailed report, or other ways you can go to guest assignments page, and here you can see that report. So as I mentioned here, that here this machine is compliant, right? So this is showing compliant view for that machine. Nothing is pending here, but this machine is non-compliant. Let's see what is in the detailed report. So here it is showing that, hey, you have 3 updates, and 2 of them are critical and 1 is important, and you are missing these patches. So what you can do, you can use update management to receive, or for our automatic patch update, you can use that solution. And here the intention of this policy is to provide something for the customer so that they can troubleshoot their environment, and at the same time they can know if patches are missing. I also try to create some environment where uh, this is supposed to fail, right? Or license is expired, or you're missing the license. I try to create those scenarios, but what happens, the system, it recovers, so it is hard to show that alive. But I captured one of the scenario in a picture, so I'm just showing that to you. So in this case, machine, right, I assigned the ESG license, but the license was not delivered to the machine. In that case, you will see that the detail here, that it will show like the license is missing, so something is wrong. In this case, what customer can do, they can reach out to us, right, and then we can try to figure out the solution. And there are few more policies. I will just quickly talk about this. So this policy, as I mentioned earlier, that some of the customer, they created a license by mistake, right, and then they end up getting a huge bill. So this is to solve that problem. What you can do, you can just assign this policy, and what it does, it prevents you to create licenses. So if if I already have created couple of ESU license, and nobody is supposed to create license in my org, what I can do, I can just assign this policy, and I have already assigned this policy here. So I can assign this policy, and after once that policy is assigned, and if I try to create any license, license creation will fail. So this is to uh, uh, so in this way, nobody will be able to create license in my subscription. Or if I have licenses and if I want to modify the license, nobody will be able to do that. Yeah, that's all I had from ESU policy side. Anybody has any question?
I've got a question. I think it'd be useful with that if we could see if the prerequisites are installed beforehand. So where we need to have like a system stack from August or October from last year, and then the preparation package for 2022 was there.
Prereq for what, Mark?
For the ESU. So yeah, so we know that before we can migrate and start using the ESU keys, we needed to have those service stack updates and the preparation package installed. And I think that the reason I say that is because the system stack ones are often superseded. If say we get to this month and we were just starting to deploy it, we would need to deploy those system stacks from last year first and the preparation package and reboot the server before we could start to install the updates.
Okay. If I understand it correctly, so there are some preparation package, and yeah, right now it's not auditing that. And so the scenario is because to use ESU, customer has to use a particular version of Arc Agent. And here, if I understand, customer is using the latest Arc Agent, but some prereq packages are not installed, right?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
so I will, I got it. Currently, it's not doing that. I'll just write it down, and I will cover that too in this policy.
I think that'd be helpful, because then if something's not patching, we can then say, well, we know it's not patching because we need to deploy that historical system stack update. So it may be that we don't consider those to be superseded and they're required on top of the current stacks as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that suggestion. I will try to cover that in this policy. Any other question? Okay. Cool. You can take the screen, Arnav.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much, Amit. This was super helpful. Cool. So the last thing we've got planned for today is actually a little bit of an interactive feedback session around software distribution. So with that, we're going to start putting in some poll questions. Again, we ask that you mainly enter these in if you are external. And we're going to really try to validate kind of where you are today with using software distribution for your on-prem or your off Azure servers, and try to understand, your familiarity with VM apps as well. So we'll go ahead and I'll launch this first question, asking what solutions do you use today for software distribution? You use VM apps, SCCM, maybe other solutions. And if it's something else, feel free to also drop that into the chat. So I'll give 1 more minute for folks to just submit their response to this. So we're seeing mainly SCCM, quite a few folks using other solutions. So if you're using something else, feel free to drop that in the chat. And it looks like only 1 of you is using VM apps actually in your environment. Very cool. Awesome. So I'll go ahead and click done. And my next question is, how familiar are you potentially with VM apps as well? So if you have no knowledge, put like 1, or if you just heard of it, if you've used it and played around with it, but maybe not brought it to production, maybe a 3. If you use it in production, you're expert 4 or 5, etc. So love to learn where folks are in terms of their VM apps knowledge. Cool. Awesome. So I'm seeing that the kind of results are skewing towards maybe not knowing that much about VM apps. So we have an average of 1.4. So most folks here are not familiar with VM apps for software distribution, which is really helpful feedback for us as well. So I'm going to quickly screen share, and I'll show you guys a little bit of what VM apps looks like just for familiarity for folks. So here I am in Azure portal, right? And I'm logged into an Azure Compute Gallery today, right? And so I'm here with this environment. And so the way that VM apps works is, at a high level, in an Azure Compute Gallery, just like you can upload a VM image definition, you can similarly upload a VM app definition. And so you'd specify, some information, some gallery details, publishing options as well for your VM apps metadata, the end of life date, UL links, URIs, etc., etc. And you'd basically go ahead and create an application definition for your third-party app in your compute gallery. So you upload the app into the centralized Azure Compute Gallery. And the way it then works is for your actual Azure VMs, you go to your extensions or apps, and here you would have an option just like your extensions to similarly add in your VM apps as well. So you'd be able to do a third-party application deployment, selecting add application. You would select an app, for example. You'd potentially click, save, and it might have multiple versions. So you would get to select from that. You'd click save, and then, you might monitor that deployment as well. And you might specify an installation order if you have multiple applications. So today, that's a high-level overview of how VM apps works on your Azure native VMs. And so what we're considering is basically whether or not extending this experience to Arc servers would help address some of those software distribution needs you might have with SCCM for your Arc servers as well. With that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions before we showcase or kind of follow on with some more questions, if that's all right with folks.
I personally think it'd be interesting to see it in a server environment for those that are just Arc enabled and not native VM, as a considerable amount of our is on-prem or at least a hybrid environment. So to have that consistency between native Azure and hybrid would be useful.
Awesome. That's great. That's great to hear. Any other initial thoughts or folks want to share? Cool. Right. I will go ahead and then post the next question. So one thing you probably did notice was you had to upload your application to this sort of your third-party app images to that third-party image gallery, that Azure Compute Gallery. I'm curious from folks' perspective, is that something you would consider difficult, easy, something you'd be basically comfortable with from a deployment perspective for your software distribution needs? Awesome. Cool. So this is skewing somewhere in sort of the middle between 1 and 5. And if anyone has any concerns that they would like to highlight with this or feel like it's a blocker, that's sort of the next question we have, where we're curious if this requirement to upload would be a potential blocker for your organization. And if so, kind of why. So I'll put in the chat, but I'd love to hear kind of the feedback as well if anyone wants to unmute and share. Cool. So it looks like this isn't perceived as a blocker for most of you. If anyone it is perceived as a blocker you want to share, or if not, you can always share with us offline as well. Awesome. Well, in that case, I guess we'll move along to the next question. This has a little bit to do with some of the limits with the current VMApps capability. So one limit is we do limit, or VMApps has a limit of 2 GB per application for 3P app uploaded to Compute Gallery today. So we're curious if that would be a potential blocker for your organization where you have apps that are beyond that size, and because of that, this wouldn't be usable. So this is skewing to be much more of a blocker. I'm curious if folks want to put in the chat or want to share like what type of application size they would deal with, where you'd want to see this limit kind of leveled up to. All right. Kind of on a similar vein, we want to ask about a similar limit, which is on the number of apps you can manage. And so there's a 25 app limit as well with VMapps today. So we're curious if that's sort of the order of magnitude of apps you would expect to see a software distribution solution manage for your on-prem servers, or if you're looking for a higher number of third-party apps you're typically dealing with in your environment as well. So this is actually much more overwhelmingly a limit. It looks like almost 70% of you are mentioning that this number of 25 apps isn't going to work at your scale. So that's a very helpful feedback as well. Great. So I'm going to click done. Now, next piece that we kind of want to gauge is around the customer experience. So I showed you the portal experience. VMapps would likely have a portal, a CLI, potentially policy experience. I'm curious about how usable this looks to you and sort of your needs. And so you can kind of give it a rating out of 5 stars based off of just what you initially saw if we were just to extend that for Arc Server. Alrighty, we're almost done with these polls, so thank you again for everyone's patience and input. Last 2 quick ones. One is sort of, given what you saw today, let's say we brought VMapps to Arc Server to market to support software distribution. How likely would you say you are to end up using this, given where it is today? So, great. So we're like a 3.5. Whoa. And finally, last question. We are also thinking about or exploring the idea of a potential local cache for software distribution, similar to like a distribution point with SCCM. If we were to have that also available, how would that change or improve your or modify your likeliness to use VM apps for software distribution? And if that's something that doesn't really impact you, feel free to just put the same answer again. Yeah. All right, one last question. Sorry, I kind of lied. Let's say we were able to increase the app limit and number of apps as well that are supported, sort of those limitations. How likely would that make you to use VM apps for Arc Server if we started supporting that? We're trying to gauge kind of what enhancements you're looking for. All right. Awesome. That's a wrap in terms of the questions we have. One thing we did quickly want to share is if you want to provide more detailed feedback, we have an ak.ms link where you can join, and we're setting up one-on-one studies as well on VM apps and software distribution for Arc. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well, but would really love to set up further time with customers and understand this area. Cool. Right? Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's a wrap on everything we've got planned for today's session. Sorry, Gail, go ahead.
Oh, hi, no, will it be okay for me also share another additional feedback opportunity about how customer adopt, like how you all might leverage
Sure.
like management services, and we were also interested setting up some follow-up conversation with people who are interested in this topic. If it's okay, I will put it in the chat.
Yep.
Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much to everyone for joining the monthly ARC community call. Have a great rest of your month, and we're looking forward to keeping the momentum going with these and all the newsletter and exciting updates. Thanks, folks.